Колеги, доброго дня. Мені треба пригадати, яким чином модерувати події.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I need to moderate this session, so it's my joy to present this project to look at Ukraine in different global ratings. This is not a first project, but I'd like to invite our speakers and initiators of the project to the podium. So I'd like to invite Sevgil Musaieva-Borovyk, editor-in-chief of Ukrainska Pravda, co-initiator of the project, Dmytro Davydenko, VoxUkraine. They gather data and experts for notes. Dmytro Shymkiv, deputy head of presidential administration of Ukraine. He's always discussing Ukraine before investors, and he cares about the ratings. Tymofii Milovanov, who is president Honorary of Kyiv School of Economics, and the chief of our communication director at UkraineInvest, Lubomyr Markevych. But before that, I'd like to give the floor to Volodymyr Kadygrob, project initiator and managing partners at Zeitgeist Design. Thank you all. I'd like to thank the team for working with us. Some time ago, after Maidan, about 3 years ago, I invited Sevgil to work together to organize some project that would help our investors to look for information about Ukraine, and also in order to monitor the dynamics better, and also to have such discussions and to think what can be done to improve Ukraine's position in global ratings. Thank you, Volodya. Now maybe we'll give the microphone to Sevgil. Okay, there is microphone. Thank you. True, this idea came out after Maidan. Volodymyr called me and invited me. Well, he said it's very important to look at the country in dynamics. What's happening after Maidan, during the war. We have developed this idea for the project. Analyzed 50 ratings with help of the team, and first project came out in 2015. Honestly, that was very interesting project. Many people thanked us for it. Why do we do this? First of all, of course, in our news and our materials, we like to talk about Ukraine and its place in international ratings, but oftentimes that is taken out of context. And this is a portrait of Ukraine, of how we are viewed in the world. It's hard to see what's happening out of context, but when you analyze many ratings, you can see where Ukraine really changes, what areas are problematic, and what areas are good due to human capital and reforms. We do get answers because that is important. For example, security issue. We are concerned about Ukraine's security in view of conflict with Russia, so rating of military readiness is important for us, and Ukraine shows positive dynamics. If we're talking about failed state rating, Ukraine lost some steps there. Why? Well, because of the conflict, because we really cannot respond to some challenges expediently enough. We can see similar tendencies in other ratings represented in this project. It's very important to do because this is the third year that we have this discussion about reform. Something reforms are too slow, some are too fast. And what does really Ukraine do? I often face an opinion that right here, inside the country, changes seem to be too slow. While you are traveling abroad, or people visiting us see significant changes. And we can see dynamics where Ukraine is, where we do right reforms, where more efforts should be given to improve situation. I will give floor to Borys because VoxUkraine has calculated all these positions, analyzed these ratings, and made majority of work. Thank you. Borys, tell us a little bit about the choice of experts and how your analysis happened. Yes, thank you. I'm glad Volodymyr called us to participate in the project this year. A small remark. Economists do not like ratings. They even have a saying. Science dies when rating appears. Because a rating can be subjective, even distorted. Or at least information will be distorted because manipulations are very easy. But this project analyzes not just one rating, but it tries to show Ukraine in view of many, or better, all representative and significant ratings, which is something other people have not done before. And this is the value of the project, I believe. Because we had a previous project that Volodymyr did together with Ukrainska Pravda, there was a base. We have gathered all possible ratings where Ukraine would be represented, where some adequate institutions would do assessment, where methodology would be proper, as we believed. And then these ratings were sent to about 10 experts, and they have chosen additional ratings that they believed to be important and removed some that were doubtful. So in this way we created joint rating database. I think we had 37 ratings and indices in the final count, and then know how this project is to divide these ratings in 5 main areas: economy, freedom, corruption, state, and human capital. If we look at all these ratings, then you could see or have impression that Ukraine is moving in different directions, even within the same area. For example, the number of participants within rating could decrease from 80 participants last year. Now we have 100, and so Ukraine has lost a couple steps. But in fact, we have grown, but just a number of countries increased. So it's important to see where Ukraine is on the background of other countries. So it's very useful visual instrument. You can enter and you can see where Ukraine is moving in every sector. I don't want to tell you where Ukraine is more successful or less. So, you know, Ukrainska Pravda website. Some of you might know VoxUkraine. So at the main pages you will see those ratings. So enjoy your views. Thank you. As we look at certain layers of ratings, we'll look from the viewpoint of founders of a project. But now I would like to ask users how practical these ratings are. As you discuss things with investors, I'd like to thank Western CIS Enterprise Fund and Vitaly. This is a long term platform. You can see dynamics without manipulations, because your fund wants to improve lives of average Ukrainians. You're influencing us through many programs you are financing in Ukraine, and many of these areas are working together with clusters of ratings we have analyzed. So thank you for making it in very useful online form this year. Dmytro, first question to you from Crisis Media Center. Congratulations on your birthday. Thank you for finding time to come on your birthday to us. So, this instrument, how useful it is to you, how much investors pay attention to these ratings, rankings, when they look at Ukraine and assess their position. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. And thank you for congratulations. When I came to politics from business, the first thing that impressed me that we do not use quantity or quality indicators, KPIs, key performance indicators, usually cause a lot of rejection, while this is one of the main elements in business to compare teams in different countries, to assess with more meaning the development of the market, their potential. And for me, this is a principle. KPI is one of main instruments of management and leadership overall. I was criticized for introducing any KPIs, but I will stand on this position. And rating is one of types of KPIs when Ukraine, well, any country is assessed in different matters. While this is important and effective, in order to understand what KPI is, and this is not a goal in itself, it's like measuring temperature or pressure, blood pressure. Other measurements, there are many instruments, many approaches how you measure temperatures in Celsius, in Fahrenheit, in Kelvin, and 36.6 is good. How about 36.7? In some countries, 37 is still okay. So, this is understanding of what needs to be done for the temperature, body temperature, or for the rating to change. You cannot change the temperature, right? Children know how to raise their temperature in the thermometer so they wouldn't go to school. But we need to assess the state of the nation in many ways, and we need to apply proper measurements. A rating as indicator and purpose of the state. PISA is another important rating. We have ratings for Ukraine 2020 strategy, and we are insisting for Ukraine to participate in PISA. PISA allows to compare education in different directions, especially in secondary school. We see many assessments. Just giving you one example. But now, going back to the question of discussing with investors. When we meet with investors, they also read all ratings. But when we have one instrument and they can see those indicators, they are not looking as assessment of development. They look at this indicator that would help them understand. That's why we have credit ratings. There are several credit ratings too. Different experts assess the situation different ways. But most interesting thing, methodologies. In here, I believe experts, well, for journalists, rating +1, -5, +10, going up, going down. And in politics, you need to reach a certain number. But for experts, and for those who develop certain changes, it's important to look at methodologies and how the assessment was done. As we analyzed last indicators of WEF, I was surprised. The first question for business was inflation, not corruption, as in Slovakia, in Ukraine, we used to have, in Mexico and Bulgaria, but also inflation. And very significantly, then we try to understand why. Then we look inside ratings, we see certain things Well, some indicators are going down. When we try to look and analyze, we see certain other ratings that could be compared to other measurements, and we start to understand, yes, it does concern us, and what can be next steps to decrease this indicator or to influence it to help it grow dynamically. When investors look at problems, they are not interested so much at reasons. That's for science, for historians to study reasons. Investors are interested in what will happen to these indicators next. What does the nation do to change a certain positioning? They're interested in dynamics, but refer to baseline. They use rating. Inflation is also indicator. GDP level is indicator. Ratings accumulate several things, and they allow to look at development in different directions, militarily, economically, educationally, in view of human capital. I am a bit critical here, and I should be more critical to myself, of course. We talk much about economy, we talk much about human capital, but there are questions of education and economics, and it reflects in many ratings. The level of our education that remains quite high, but we also growing rating or decreasing rating of human capital. People leave, so Ukraine becomes intellectual donor of the world if we look at global context, and that concerns me. Talking about where specifically I'd like to see more work, that's a matter of how to create conditions for and interest people to stay or to get inflow of intellectual capital, to develop intellectual capital. I agree with the rest of speakers, of course, on what they already said. That's an important question. My question is to Tymofii Milovanov, Honorary President of Kyiv School of Economics. You're economist. What ratings do you trust? What ratings are important for you when you look at something? Several questions. Two questions. What ratings do I trust? I trust no rating. Or, for example, rating for global competitiveness reports. 3 or 4 experts. You know those know people, and they all have their own opinions. Now, they're hidden behind that rating. They could be sitting right here. We could shake their hands. These are the people. It's a beauty contest in a way. Someone is liked better for whatever subjective reason, but this, of course, this is simplified understanding of ratings and indices, but actually these experts were selected for a purpose. And not just we here selected them, they were selected by a council of this international rating that tries to select people whose opinions could be comparable throughout nations. So there is a certain information, the fact that these experts were selected, meaning they are trusted from outside, which is benefit. This project is important, in fact, because they look at so many ratings that you don't understand whether it's victory or betrayal. Do we understand common picture? No. Multiply everything by everything and see whether it's plus or minus. How do you put the weights together? Because for some people, human capital is important. They look at those 5 ratings. And others, of course, but they will put low weight for other ratings, but high weight for human capital indication. Others say plus 23 is tax pressure improved, and that's important. And the other person would look for this peculiarity. So that tells us that we are different. This project tells us we are different, and there are no simple answers to questions. Society is debating whether it's victory or betrayal, but actually that's a mix, because we are all different, and different things are important to different people, and this big number of these ratings are telling that in your face. In this way, that helps us to be more constructive. Second important part, if we write in strategy 2020 or 2000 or 10,000, whatever, we will not write 57 ratings. We'll put certain specific KPIs, and these strategies should put focuses. And the problem with KPIs is they're important. If you have no quantitative indicators, there is nothing to talk about. We improve public governance. Well, you're saying we do, I'm saying we don't. But how do we find the truth? Well, we need specific numbers. For example, amount of taxes. Keep the pressure, but just rename all the taxes. So one rating can be reached either technologically, if you know the methodology, or working with experts. But all 37 ratings, you cannot cover them all. If we see somewhere in KPI strategy doing a business rating and it goes up, I read someone saying on Facebook, let's pass a new law to improve rating. That's good, but if at the same time we see on other 36 ratings we are falling, that gives us a clear prevention from manipulation. So we look at all ratings. It's important for our education, for motivation, which reminds me, testimonies that are done at Federal Reserve System, they're saying we need to increase the rate or decrease. They can talk about half a year, but they will not pull out one model. They will look at 20 models, and they're saying these models show this and the other model shows that. Usually, picture is very mixed. Some things need to go up and some things maybe not so much, but overall you can see results. So this is a rating that we need to have, and this instrument needs to be used. It's not just placing it on Ukrainska Pravda and go and enjoy your rest at home. No, we need to learn how to work, and I hope analysts will write some articles looking deeper than normally. So I'm thankful to you all, and I believe that it's very important that things have been done that way. Tymofii? Just before we begin this event, we started, well, if we made one rating of betrayal, I think that's where we would reach very high points, but that's another matter. Visualization of things is very important. Maybe you've seen some visual solutions allow to look at Ukraine, where we are, compared to some other positions where we are at this rating, and also comparing us geographically to our neighbors. So my question to Mr. Markevych. UkraineInvest, when you speak with investors, you get comparisons with our geographical neighbors. Just recently, today or yesterday, there was a comment from one beer company that said labor cost is growing in Ukraine, and due to visa-free regime, maybe the labor cost will grow up. So will this visualization help you in your negotiations with investors, as you will do it from now on? Thank you, Natalia. Let me start from afar. I lived most of my life in Canada, and also many years in Ukraine. But I grew up in Canada, and there were ratings, so I know about things. Average Canadian does not care much who goes up, Switzerland or Iceland. When I came here, I understood that ratings for other countries about Ukraine were important because it was a new, unknown, young unknown country, and so ratings starts saying something about Ukraine. But then new stereotypes were born that are reflected in certain indicators and are reflected in certain ratings. When you talk about post-Soviet world, you can see that there are some hints that the whole post-Soviet camp cannot get out of this classification. They remain, and very few get out. But then there are very few dramatic improvements. But here we see many more ratings for internal consumption, let's say, because citizens of Ukraine do not have enough information about themselves. It's interesting for people to see where they are and how they can be compared to international organizations, but there are many places for subjectivism here, like my colleague said. From the side of investors, a young organization, office, UkraineInvest, has a relationship mostly to large investors. Large investors, in essence, come to question of expanding their business in many countries, not so much based on ratings as such, but due to other factors. Yes, ratings could be a basic place to begin a review or to check whether they assess indicators properly. So they would compare their indicators to ones in the rating. But how can you understand that a corrupt country like China wins so much investment every year? So there are other advantages compared to the fact that corruption plays its role. What's the advantage of Ukraine? Is the fact that it has been trying to announce its entrance into the European Union for a long time. Ukraine is also the border of the European Union, and these factors, they go together. In my opinion, they are also in parallel with other ratings entering the discussion in Ukraine, and Ukraine needs to take this to external world, not just to combat ratings. Actually, can't win anything if you just keep debating, attack openly those experts. You need to do your parallel image and parallel message. One of the key things we have introduced this year in UkraineInvest to invite ministers, high officials, and Oksana Markarova, who is responsible for investment, to keep repeating that more changed over the last 3 years than over previous 23. This is like a mantra for us. Maybe it doesn't say much in itself, but at least it gives understanding that any rating, anything you've heard until 2014, leave it aside. Let's look at what's happening now inside the nation and abroad, how it's received. That's one image. I can keep giving you examples, but at least that's a long answer to your short question. Thank you. Let's try and look at a specific KPIs. At specific KPIs. Doing business rating. So questions to KPIs. What are our goals? Can you tell us where we should have been? Thank you. We had different things. Top 20 to 40 index, doing business index. A book, report is this thick book, 500 pages if you don't know, that gives a lot of detail and presents very interestingly what are components and what brought together to doing business rating. When we were at 83 and they were saying, why so small? But then when you look at components that have increased so much, the rating is not a number, but it consists out of 6 that also break down. Rating allows us to see we've done many things. Things have gone up, but here there are indicators that have pulled us down, like access to capital, financial stability, the banking system. Right there in 2015, this is something that pulled us down. We were last among the last. Now it's pulling us down. Now we have the regulation bill in the parliament, and there is a request to the parliament to have a session on the regulation to discuss this bill to raise some rating in these separate issues. But rating should not be set as a goal. Of course, it's a benchmark. Why this project is so important? Let me sidestep. In international political education, there is understanding called comparative politics. That's comparative politics to develop policies. In Ukraine, it's not taught. It's except for Kyiv School of Economy, they started teaching it. But very often understanding processes, understanding in more detail why we jumped, and other country jumped while we didn't. We did similar things, but they are jumping higher. Different dynamics, different circumstances, different nuances. This is analysis. So I understand that politically it's very easy to say, let's get in top 20, top 30. Well, it's like in sports. If you motivate your team, you want to go to top league, you go to your yard, your boys play, and we are telling them, tomorrow, you're a politician. So they say, tomorrow we are playing in top league. No, you won't, because you need to train and qualify. How you qualify? By these many things that you need to do. As you decompose ratings, you understand what specific things can be done, but then how to grow. But where I am concerned, and I support Tymofii here, that when rating begins, place in rating becomes a target, a goal. Maybe we should not. Let's say business inspections. When we said we are not inspecting anything, Ukrainian business said, "Great. Then we don't need to do anything." But if we talk about fire inspections, food quality, the countries that do have sanitary inspections, others don't. And there are correlated coefficients, the number of intestines diseases in these countries, and these numbers correlate. Other matter, if you find smart regulation, where effective regulation is involved, because there should be regulation. Regulation in European Union is different from how we see libertarianism in Ukrainian space. So we need to find compromises that will not probably increase rating, but doing business is much more important than doing business rating. Okay, we have an example. Neighbors of Ukraine in this rating, and the question, are we really in the company where we want to be? For example, Vietnam. Do you think their position is better on doing business than in Ukraine? But it's you're a professional economic journalist. Did you go to Vietnam? Can you compare? Vietnam, Bosnia, Ukraine, San Marino, China. Let's start with the best. Just recently, maybe you've seen it. If not, read it, please. I advise you, Financial Times. gave a great gift to Ukraine. They have compared how doing business rating has changed from 2011. They've taken all post-Soviet countries, Eastern European countries, and find that Ukraine that has demonstrated the biggest progress. Therefore, this rating brings us to the champions level in some sense. On the other hand, doing business is a bit dangerous rating because everyone looks at it, that it's shortcoming and the politicians are using it. Last government was able to adjust this rating much better than previous. If you compare previous slide, 2013, 2014, when the laws were passed of 2011 and 2012, they were considered. So, over these years, 12, 13, 14, to say 30 positions doing business in Ukraine improved, well, let me tell you, there is certain artificiality to this rating. Politicians, or maybe not, cabinet of ministers, are using it, and quite efficiently, and not just in Ukraine, as I understand. Doing business, easiness of doing business, we need to look at specific indicators that impede business. And so, overall, we see that China was mentioned. China is our neighbor. Well, even by size of investment, I'm not talking about absolute measurements in the economy. These are totally different things. So, is doing business a direct correlation that if we get to top 20, then our economy would be not 100 billion, but 300 or 400 billion in GDP. But if you look at the whole picture, why so? Why so? That's a separate conversation. But this picture, this position, is unpleasant because investors are looking at the small world. They are looking at the small world, but localization is important. And when you're in the region, then if you're the ugly duckling in your region, that's not attractive. Look to the east. It should not be our idea fix, but we need to be at least at the same level as Russia, maybe better. So if you look at this project, in majority of ratings, Russia is much ahead. It's not just unpleasant. This is unsafe for our country. This is national security issue. Well, doing business rating, for me to explain, this is very complicated component. When you divide components, then it's very clear. The jump happened because one of the main component is a question of getting permissions to.
So there were simplifications of the procedures on construction at the time. So it consists of several components. First, starting business, procedures, and then construction permits. And this will be in the draft law, and we will move forward in this. And construction permits, we are really cool in this because majority of countries in Europe, they have stricter rules to get construction permits. Second question that was discussed for a long time, this is access to electricity, and we know that there is a problem and it will be solved due to the implementation of law on electricity market, registering property, and we remember the situations of radar attacks and cases with notary before the law was adopted. And next one is getting a credit. We know the easiness of getting the credit, and also minority investors and payment of taxes. And we have improvement in this. We decreased the number of taxes, but administering is still too high. So cross-border activities and the situation with Russia that affects the rating, because this is the easiness of doing business with trans-border states, and also implementation of contracts in business environment, and here the issue of the state and so on, and also how the issues are resolved concerning insolvency when banks or financial institutions are not able to pay, and how it is solved in a legal area. And the last one, how labor market is regulated. So we live according to the labor code of the Soviet Union. And when we divide this into components, we see then clear tasks that should be resolved. So we understand this comparison with our neighbors and our eight's position in the rating, and Vladimir cannot join us now, and unfortunately, and one of these comments are about credibility. We can tell many stories, and this is done by the politicians, but ratings, they provide us with a better understanding. And I would like to ask Lubomyr, because from one side I believe that this is important to say that during the last 3 years more than 23 changed. So it means that people are interested in doing something in Ukraine, but many international investors, they are still not committed. And will this help you in your work to improve the situation? Of course, big business will look at this picture, but they do not need this picture because they know geographical position of Ukraine and the Baltic states. This is a small part of the former Soviet Union, but Ukraine, it is where it is, and historically, for Ukraine, it is difficult to provide its proper image, and investors who represent the big investors, they remember what was 20 years ago. They are from the Cold War generation, and they have different ideas than young investors. And those who are 50 or 60, they still should fight their own ideas that they had before, and so they can look at this picture, and they maybe will see better figures, but they look at the picture and what will motivate them to come here. But some competitors already came, and they look not only on the rating, but also they look at their competitors who are here. And so big businesses such as Mitsubishi, Skoda, and others, so they know something. And if they came to Ukraine, if they started business, so they have long-term plans here. And if you're a young investor, you do not understand the situation and you lack money, so this picture would scare you away. So we didn't consider the age in taking such decisions. Vladimir Lupati, Sofia Social Center and Center of Innovation. I would like to respond on this issue. First, I am thankful to organizers because we have an area for intellectual discussion about Ukrainian brand and image and about what we can do with the index. I believe that here there is a key issue. We are not interested in separate indexes. We need global thinking, and the index that would bring Ukraine to the level of brand countries. And if we achieve this, it will help us not only with the capitalization of separate fields, but it will bring attention to the country on the whole. So let's look at the shadow side of Ukrainian indexes. The Economist last year published Social Innovation Index. This is the index 45 countries were involved in, and Ukraine is not in this index. And let's try to understand what it means. So the country where they have a revolution of dignity, where the reactor of social innovations was launched, and the country that is really want to develop and to find new model of economic and political model, and this country is not represented in this rating, and it means that we are absent in the modernized map of Europe that is renovated based on innovation, not only technical innovation. So this is an integral rating that is in the focus of attention, and it shows how we work with Horizon 2020 program and how we are absent in the Interact program concerning social innovation. And the next step could be to enter this rating, and I think that Ukraine have a lot of benefits here, and that would be a positive step. One of the main reasons why we are absent in the rating is the absence of statistical data. So we should understand that the main reason is statistical data. Among 35 criteria for the membership of European Union is the full-fledged statistics, and in Europe and the United States, in all those countries you've mentioned, they have statistical standards that correspond to international standards. And for today, I will give you an example. This is the problem we try to resolve among the ministry and how they calculate investment in Ukraine. National Bank calculates one way, economy another way, and associations, they do it another way. So they should change one model, and they can use European model. And also in business, we had the same situation, why we are not in that ratings. So they say we are lacking data based on which we can calculate it. That's why we do not calculate it about you. So in order to participate in PISA, the state should write an application, and they pay money. And then for 3 years ahead, you should do it 3 years before PISA starts. And we wrote it in the 2020 strategy, and we have it in task of the Cabinet of Ministers, and the Cabinet of Ministers put it in the budget, and there was fight for money, and the same we had with Horizon. And if we believe that people come and assess Ukraine, and we started the reform of open data, that's why I greet everything what Vox do and the School of Economics does, because people do not know about the hospitals, number of hospitals that are in operation, and about the number of companies that are regulated. And when the expansion fund, can I see the categories of population in order to create a model? I do not have such data. So this is the problem, and we are absent because we do not have proper figures, and we are absent in this area. And about the rating and about our project, thank you for your recommendations. And maybe there should be a list where we are not present, but we should be present if we had applications.
Or, like you're saying, Dmytro, there should be statistics that would allow us to appear in some ratings, but at least you can tell us about ratings that at least appeared in this project. That would be an interesting list of ratings, actually, where we are, but Ukraine is not there. Like I said in the very beginning, in order for Ukraine to be there, that should be criteria for us to review this rating. So maybe next year, when we do things like this, we will not be just putting some ratings into the basket, but we'll make a list, additional list. What ratings did come in? Yes, of course, some representative ratings did not come in. Like today, we have data for 2015. 2015 is too late, but data is, well, in that rating of 2015 is actually using the data from 2013, so it would be surprising. But actually, ratings are, there are thousands of them. The ratings that are made more or less professionally. They're not made based on internet questionnaire for 300 people. Several hundreds of those ratings. Ukraine, in some cases, is not represented, so we reach 60, 70, out of which we select most representative. That's expert assignment. Okay, thank you. I'd like to come back to one local question, maybe, that relates to human capital. Because we understand for doing business is, and others, it's about people, specific citizens of Ukraine with a level of education, enthusiasm, entrepreneurship, well, the way they are. And in this rating we can see, and many of you have seen analysis on the matter from our experts. So I'd like to ask Tymofii to give a comment here, because on one hand that shows some unclear stability, but if we are, and even decrease, but if we talk about our neighbors, then it's Peru, Jordan, Armenia, Algiers is as good neighborhood. Yes, we talk about working with brand, with image, but what should Kyiv School of Economy do? Or other institutions working together that become part of the brand of Ukraine to make our society a bit different. Thank you. About neighboring approach, if we just look at one, where we are, rating where we are, there's very little chance that there will be European country in our immediate neighborhood, a couple steps up or a couple steps down. And also, it doesn't mean that that's where we are. Human capital, okay. There are some highly educated people that build professionally drug dealing network in South America. It's very powerful human capital, but actually they're doing for the worst of the world, and so it's easier for example, for them to open a drug dealing point than for us to open a shop for groceries, for example. So it's not just placing the rating, but what is happening with our human capital? Do we have a crisis of human capital? Do we have a brain drain? What do we do with that? Is it a threat to national security and so on? So two responses that I'd like to give a comment on. First, it's not matter so much if we have great or not so great human capital. What we do with it, do we create systems to bring back talented people? Do we create this idea to bring people back? Or do we involve new ones? Some say bring them back, we need to bring people back, but also we should attract more in Kyiv School of Economy. Sometimes we have Americans. Even last year, one person in group of 30 people, one American student changes atmosphere because there is diversity in system of education changes different people, not just from America, from other places. We need people to come. We need not to be isolated. Also, our country changes, even with good human capital, so transformation does happen. And in order to respond to these transformation, human capital needs to be transformed as well. So what do we do to meet this challenge? Because that already happened in the 1990s when we had great, powerful engineers and mathematicians, and many of them were either lost because they were not able to adapt to market economy. Some immigrate. So human capital can be strong. But we have challenges, whatever it is, either returning people because of globalization. Visa-free regime is great, I believe, but there are challenges. People are leaving and we need to bring them back if we want to. Or maybe not. Maybe it's good for everyone to leave. Some people believe so. But then there should be national strategy for everyone to leave. Okay, I am giving out jokes, but in order to bring people back, we need to do something. But also, we need to respond to challenges. There are people who cannot find a job, and there are people who cannot find employees, a mismatch. Great philosopher who knows Nietzsche perfectly, but it wouldn't help him to work in a company that produces beer. Maybe we need those in companies, maybe not. Ukraine Catholic University has brought $60 million over several years. But higher Russian educational establishment went into government ownership because they couldn't find a way on their own. Georgia, I'm not sure, but Moldova, Russia, or Belarus did not do it. Nazarbayev University is a state-owned enterprise. Okay, maybe private. Maybe Nazarbayev University is private. Maybe government is not supporting it. But there are victories. We need to do things. We need to respond to ratings we see. So there is a problem, despite ratings, and we need to face it. Okay. So do we want everyone to leave or to stay? In capital, 4 components: education, health, labor market, and innovations. These 4 components, around which the rating of human capital changes. Change takes 10 years because that's impact. That happens in the world. There is inertia. Labor market is easy to change. Innovation market is very change, and we are competing with other countries. And overflow happens around that. But if we look, I also make fun at World Economic Forum, where we are the best. We are in 27 top countries of the world on quality of math and science education. It's spreading education. We are in top 10. Literacy. People can read. Great. So there are areas when you ask an average family whether they're happy with education in school, they're not. But if you compare qualities of our graduates with other countries, then there will be comparison as well. But they have no social skills that are not measured in ratings. So, well, healthcare, we see how this reform happens. But another important, we're talking about innovation. And INSEAD does it very well. They do research, compares innovativeness of different countries, and there are 3 components: growing talent. There are many elements that bring it together, but second is keeping talent. What does the country do to keep? And then protection of intellectual property. These are components. Can you earn on intellectual property? So these are innovative countries components. There are factors that in the 1990s allowed for strong mathematicians to go to Israel and to build it up. We now moved into competitiveness. Well, we have small victory from yesterday, World Economic Forum. We're steps up. And not just on index of competitiveness, but about competition. Question to Sevgil, editor-in-chief of Ukrainska Pravda. How much do you believe communication and work of journalists is influenced by experts who make this rating? We can do reforms, but the question is, how will it be brought or not to the general public? External communications, I believe Ukraine can do much more. So the question is what we want to tell the world. Because overall, I believe there is a great problem that Ukraine is considered as a corrupt country. If you look at what Western media writes, then it's another corruption scandal. I will tell you that corruption is not the biggest problem of the state, of course. It's an important problem, and much has been done to overcome corruption, anti-corruption bureau, electronic declarations, and there's other things that would be happening. Whether there will be a separate fighting corruption rating, maybe not, maybe yes. But if we look at judicial reform or launching anti-corrupt court, still painful question. But I believe where the biggest problem is, and it's good that we look at this, it's human capital, attractiveness, and human. And I believe human capital, preserving human capital, is very important. And engaging population in work is very important, because if you don't manage the country well, all smart people will leave. That's not a secret. That's a very well-known thing. So, about Portrait of Ukraine, yes, we would like to discuss how our country can be interesting to foreign investors. There is a lot of potential. Much can be told about our companies and technological potential, and I think we need to keep working with this. But I think not enough was done here. I think Dmytro will add something, because he is responsible for investment portrait of Ukraine in the world. Maybe I can add some formulations, because we said it's important to be proud of Ukraine. We're saying what is done to understand it more. Well, I'd like to raise the discussion. Of course, I'd like to agree with Sevgil. Corruption is divide on between high corruption, mid-level corruption, and everyday corruption. Until certain year, you could officially declare taxes you pay in Eastern countries. Siemens history is well known, and turbines, Siemens turbines that appeared in Crimea, and our whole culture changed. And Our situation is, yes, we like beating at ourselves, but political scandals in other countries, they also happen. Very often we need to understand that sometimes we get a bitter pill that was not tested in other countries, and so they decided, okay, let's test it on us. But let's look at instruments that other countries introduce: changing of culture, prevention, changing processes and procedures. I really lack pride about Ukraine. Yes, ratings are low. Things are not everything is bad. So we like talking about potential. We have not just great potential. We have exact examples of implemented potential. Ukrainian companies, Ukrainian enterprises, Ukrainian designers. They're really great. We have IT specialists that not leave Ukraine because life cost compared to their income is bringing best benefits here. And that allows me to be proud. We need to work hard, of course, but at international meetings when we go to be proud, not beat ourselves. Other countries could do the same, yet they don't. That's what I lack. And of course, there are problems. Can we overcome them fast? Maybe not. But will we beat on that rock? Yes, we will. Because generation that came after revolution of dignity in companies and organizations, everyone in their place, they are hitting at the rock. They're changing the country, and that's fact. So we at least need to be a little proud, at least. Vox Ukraine is better than Vox Europe. Great. Much better. Vox Europe does not do that, these projects. I can compare. But they keep telling us you're so bad and everything is bad. I can give you examples where we go beyond many countries. Level of declaration is not unprecedented in other countries, I'll tell you. You will not find half stories, this experiment that was done over Ukraine. And it keeps going. We go forward. There are examples of great companies, products of Ukraine. Look at Ukrainian designers. That's great. New York Times gives a page. That's great. Have you heard about Polish designers, Slovak designers, Romanian ones? We have things to be proud of. This is Ukrainian business, and this is what I lack sometimes. Okay, my apologies. Vox Ukraine. Voxy, what do they do? They have strong content, but they also take existing articles about Europe and they make columns of them. As soon as we have more articles about economy in Ukraine, we'll do it. But Vox Ukraine is doing this. Vox Europe does not do that. What my hopes in Facebook. Everyone who agrees with my opinion stays my friend. Everyone else is in ban, you know. What do you think? That's the only way. I need only positive things on my page. I like positive people on my page, so Vox China was launched recently and it was copied from Vox Ukraine. That's true. I know. I know a person who was doing that. We were working together when we had revolution, when we started doing Vox Ukraine, because there are some problems in China, and we advise them on how to do this and that. China economists are multiple, and they write things, interesting things. So I wrote something on Facebook that Vox China is good, and there are some positive people. So it was not your turn. You have So some people who try to change the country, they cannot believe that you tell them exactly there are some products, new approaches that can be exported from Ukraine. And VoxUkraine is not standardized or our organization. There are innovations that are copied even in the States. Russians are trying to take that copy as well. Good evening. That's happening, but many Ukrainians are not believing that. So we are always copying from others, and it's hard to believe that somebody's copying from us. We need to believe in ourselves more. I could give you some more examples. Thank you. Well, say something and we'll conclude. I'd like to support my colleagues here, because question of human capital, creating better image in Ukraine, where do we start and where do we go? Image of Ukraine and their advantages, say in precise science, that's very important. You are too young to remember, but when Bill Gates introduced their first Windows 95, in their introductory word, he thanked all his students who worked on it and his researchers, and he also has recognized Kyiv Polytechnic University graduates at that time. Nobody even understood what he was talking about, and later it came out that these approaches of science, education, even mathematical principle created new mentality in precise science, where Windows 95 was created. So this is a small example that Ukraine today, even now, does not advertise, and we should. There are many examples like this. Even over the years I was in Ukraine, I'm amazed that these things are not known in the world. I need to write to my colleagues in Canada, for example, advertise this, because this is a great thing, and people in Canada would be surprised where these technologies came from. These unfortunately advantages are used in specific areas like precise science, but very narrow application. But politology, sociology, and other humanities, as I understand in the West, in Ukraine is non-existent. It's just in beginning of transition, transformation, and so on. Legal institutes, that's a disaster. Markevych Institute, I don't know, or university. I don't know how many graduates they have a year, but no one will take such a lawyer to work for them abroad, because they don't understand the Western world. This should be transformed, because we need to present our achievements in precise science and in all others. So this is a question of education and advertising. Advertising in Ukraine in mass media is in very beginning. This is a clear question, and it should be an agenda. There are many companies engaged, like Alexander's, and many countries are interested to work with Ukrainians, to teach Ukrainians how to talk to foreign investors with their best experience and success in Ukraine. It will not automatically transform into their positivism. It should go through some mentality, some filtration, and then this listener will understand what we are talking about in all details and nuances. This is a great advantage, but at least this is issue on agenda. So, Ukrainian Inquiry Director in Austrian, grazie. Ukrainian Inquiry Director. Radioactive. Radioactive. Have you heard about this company in Ukraine advertising Apple film was done by Radioactive, Ukraine company Radioactive, and many other filming crews include radioactive product. So, journalists, give a one person or half a person who would write through positive stories, simple Ukrainians, companies that have great achievements. We don't have enough of those. Okay, we have such product, new leaders, and it tells about young Ukrainians under 35 who make some important projects. The core of the nation. This is a project that talks about older generation of Ukraine who made their impact already. So there are things to be proud of. And these stories, success stories, very popular among readers, by the way. People need more positive success, breeds success. So, the purpose of this project is to create this discussion platform. I think Ukraine Global Ratings is very important. Thank you for attending. Thank you, speakers, for presenting many additional questions, and we really hope that journalists and analysts will take this data in their work and make some conclusions and analyze. So thank you very much for starting it together with all of us today. Thank you.
Шановні колеги, у нас буквально через декілька
Colleagues, in a couple of minutes.